Greetings, Year 12. It's the next part and the final part of our analysis that we need to do for our NEA. So there's three things. There's the magazine cover, there's the contents page, and then here finally we have the website, which is of course the cross-platform extension of the original print product. So we're going to start off by looking at the media language conventions and the sorts of things that we are looking to discuss and mention at this point. And you'll see that there are some real similarities here between the contents pages especially and this website. So things like pointing out an ordered layout, pinstripe page furniture, and having a limited colour palette. Now here they focus really on a white background with black text and red as a sort of tertiary colour. Now with that, all of these three things give a sense, maybe connotations of order. Of order and of knowledge that is kind of reassuring to your educated audience that seek knowledge in these areas. I mean, you're not going to start making it look all like fun and dandy and pink bubble writing if it's super important stuff about the growing economy of China. So that's what they've done. It looks like what it contains, if that makes sense. Now, iconic imagery or photography. That's the kind of photographs they have. That's the kind of images they have. They don't have pap shots. They have very carefully constructed images, and you can see that there with our Jeff Bezos in the middle, even our iconic image there with the binoculars at the top. And the idea that you've seen the news, now discover the story, and the idea of spying and seeing more is being indicated by those binoculars at the top. Also with the story on the right hand side, the New World Disorder, and then you've got these composited images of the world, but in this sort of disordered white, grey, red, sort of fractalized kind of way, and it gives a sense of like a globe but in pieces. Alright, so it's indicating the idea that's being discussed in the headline. Right, there's a call to action. That's going to be really important for these types of magazines. They do love a paywall, they really do. This isn't an optional subscription, so I think one of the things we need to make sure we do is have a real focus on getting the subscription and maybe the denial of the full article, or maybe them getting one free article before they have to subscribe. And you see that call to action at the top. Sometimes you'll see them at the bottom as well, but I'll show you where that is in a bit. The logo masthead. Right, obviously you might consider it as a logo on a website, but a masthead on the front cover of a magazine in the top third. But with that, it's going to be normally in the top left hand corner. We see that here with The Economist, you'll see that there with others, but it will definitely be in that topmost bar. The section headers and drop down menus. Now on The Economist, they tend to prefer a drop down menu, but very often websites have section headers. Maybe they're talking about maybe international news or domestic news or opinion or books and culture or whatever it is those subjects headers are, and you'd sort of see those subject headers in the content page, but then you would see those at the top lined up to help the audience navigate where they're going. Headlines with a teasing stand first. I think that's kind of important. When you're on the home page, you just need the headline to be teasing the audience or announcing the topic of it, rather than going much deeper than, say, the stand first. So you can see here the New World Disorder, and then it's got 2 and a bit lines just underneath it that help kind of frame what that headline means. Now we're going to point those things out and think about the ideas that this connotes or indicates or signifies to the audience, and that can be, as I was saying before, ideas about connotations of order and being trustworthy, for example, or connotations of being modern, or connotations of being traditional in some way, maybe if it had like serifed fonts or something. Now I'll take you to this here, which is the second page, and you need to be aware of this, partly because you want to talk about the analysis of a second page. You do really, because you need to be able to make one of these yourself. People in this project historically make a decent homepage, and this second page is a bit sucky. So here's the things you need to go and have, and I thought I'd have a look at the New Statesman here. There's a couple of things I might not have mentioned, but actually, if we go back and have a look at this, then make sure you get them in yours. So you're going to have, as you've got there at the top, you're going to have your New Statesman masthead logo, but there it is there at the top. I think what's important about the top bar of a website, it's almost nearly always the same. So you're going to have your top bar there, and you've got New Statesman, the logo, then you've got the call to action about subscribing, and that kind of follows you down the page, both those things, alongside the section headers, and you can see that there with different sections, and one of them highlighted in green, and then has a sort of quaternary colour to sort of indicate maybe the importance or choice of selection. And then you get into the article itself, and this is where people fall down. You will have in your second page a story about something serious in the world, and you will need to have an iconic image there at the top to help announce the beginning of the story. And then you'll have maybe another 2 different images that are all different but iconic and help elucidate and inform something about the story visually in the paragraphs of your story. So you tend to find that you'll have your section header and date at the very beginning of the article, and then you'll have your headline and stand first. And as you can see there, like the history wars is the headline, stand first is those sort of centered 3.5 lines. They're also going to have a byline because it's important, and what's the word, serious journalism, then the author will need to be credited. And then you have the article itself with the drop capital. Drop capitals sort of normally connote, if it were, sort of seriousness of information, but it's also a very common magazine convention to sort of indicate where the start is of an article. And then you'll probably find yourself going, paragraph of the main article, then you'll have an image, then you'll have another paragraph or 2, and then another main image, and that's where you're going to go, finishing off with another paragraph, so you have a mix of the 2. I'm going to give you a model for this, but you'll see what the deal is, right? Next thing, that's media language, that's how we're going to deal with that, knowing that those things are there visually on the page. Representation, again, representations are really kind of interesting and nuanced in the discussion of different difficult topics in the world around us. So if we have a look here, our game is still the same though. We have to go and point out the values, support it with a little combo of where we got this from in terms of media language, and then round out by considering how the audience is positioned to respond to this, right? So let's have a look at this rather complex representation here of Amazon is represented as calculating, powerful, yet challenged, right? And this is indicated by the iconic medium close-up of Jeff Bezos, but using the pose and costume of Dr. Evil. And I think we're familiar with Dr. Evil from Austin Powers. Certainly the audience are. See, that was a text, Austin Powers, that I would have probably seen when I was about sort of 19, 20. Now I'm 39, and that's sort of quite formative from that kind of late 90s, early 2000s. So the audience understand it, they recognise the reference, and they also have this iconic smile replaced by the Amazon logo, and yet he's described, or Amazon is described as vulnerable in the headline. So there's the sort of power and the calculating evil of Dr. Evil, yet vulnerable mentioned in the headline. And this intrigues the educated ABC One audience as to why there is this conflict between being powerful like Dr. Evil but being powerless and vulnerable. So they click through to read on for answers. That's what they do on the homepage. They click through to find out, but then once they're there, it's still the headline, and they want to read the rest of the article that's on the second page to go and find out. So hopefully you can see there that we've got our values there in purple, our evidence there, which is a bit of a quad there at least of a combo, and then we go out. So what does this make the audience think? Now, when you're creating enigma, when you're creating questions in the mind of the audience, then you normally have some kind of conflict, like powerful versus powerless, which is a bit like one of our theories that we have. I think it was Bart's, no, Levi Strauss, but they kind of misappropriated them. But the point is that with that, look for conflict. Where is there an uncertainty that the audience want answered, so they get that need to go and click through and read on. Interesting one here, the second one, is the wellness industry is represented as troubled. There's your value, and this is indicated by the headline describing it as having a dark side and the lotus symbol in the head-shaped cage, right? So the idea of like the lotus being some sort of spiritual freedom, yet you've got a gilded golden cage. So there's some sort of conflict there that intrigues the audience, because the ABC1 target audience, they want to know what the conflict is between that symbol of peace and freedom and that icon of imprisonment with the cage. So they click through and read on for answers. Try to create some kind of conflict between your image, or within your image, and your headline as well. So that's kind of important for representation. It's something that you can do. Intrigue your audience to go and click through. That doesn't mean make it horrendous clickbait, like look what happened to her after plastic surgery, because that's not what you're really there for. You're there for a little bit more serious, sort of socially active ABC1 smart kids that aren't really interested in that such tittle tattle. Now, audience, I could give you a load of frames for these, but I think there's a load of questions you need to ask yourselves. Really, the frames for these and how one might start these as sentence starters, I've sort of dealt with in previous lessons. But what I would say here is let's really get into the range of pleasures that are offered by a website. And I think they're a bit deeper than, say, a magazine cover, which merely promises certain information in some way, maybe the top one. I think what you'll have in your websites is a bit more of an interactive experience for your audience, and you'll see that that works with the different uses that we see halfway down the page. So the first thing you'll do on your analysis is define your target audience, and you'll probably sit there and think about the age, race, class, gender, interests, and I would also think about political leaning and what they might be concerned about, or how that concern might be indicated, and sort of invite them in the nature of the stories. And that kind of links to the representations that you might find in The Economist, which is a bit left leaning. Then it might be concerned about the overbearing power of big business and private industry on sort of the social fabric of society. So target audience you do first of all. The first three that we've got there, these are, and you should consider these carefully, which one of these you might go for, is how are the audience promised information on the home page using the headlines and stand first. How are the audience teased information through raising enigmas? So is it something where they're saying there's this report on this thing, or did you know this was happening there? You know, it's sort of one's in the positive and one's in the negative. And straight up, how are the audience informed? And that tends to be, and how does that information benefit their lives? That's important. So there's sort of a promise of information on the homepage, or teasing of information on the homepage. It's a bit like a magazine cover, because they want you to click through and stay on the website. But in the article itself, it's what is the information they do get rather than just promised. So there is a difference there. Next ones. How are audiences positioned to identify with and support issues? Is there language that's used that positions the audience to sort of empathise with the suffering of people who are maybe, I don't know, having their water poisoned in like Flint, Michigan in America because of sort of corporate excess? So, you know, the nature of the story, the choice of the story can offer you something in terms of identification. How are the audience positioned to identify in opposition to a problem and find something problematic, which is kind of the other side of the coin? Also, it's worth you guys having a look at how the audience can share and maybe use social media on the website. So are there, say, Twitter links, Facebook links? Are there comment sections where the audience can become part of a community and share their attitudes and opinions? Industry. What you need to do is really some basics there, but there will be some things on the website that are particularly important in terms of monetization and, you know, turning the audience's interest into money. First of all, you need to go and point out how they try to monetize the website in some way. That's going to be the main vibe of it. But stay with the publisher is. It might be a website that you've dealt with that you haven't dealt with as a magazine, so it might be a different publisher. So state who they are. Where are their display adverts? Where are those towers and banners? Which they do make some money off. Obviously, we know that digital advertising is worth 10% of the approximate value of the print advertising in the book, and it's not getting much better. Where are there also these calls to action? And you will see that a lot, because a lot of these current affairs magazines really do rely on outright subscription. Here at the bottom there are the Spectator. In fact, that follows you all the way down from the Spectator. You have this bar where you've got the topics and the writers and the podcasts and all that additional content, but that follows you down the page, and at the top of the page you've got this S for subscribe, try a month free, because that's how they get the free, and then suddenly you've given them your bank account details, and then the next month you've already accidentally subscribed without turning it off on your phone, for example. So be aware that I just want you to be pointing out those two main revenue streams, which is the display adverts and also the calls to action for subscription. There's very little way around that, and if you can point those out, then that will do with you just fine for industry. And the idea, of course, doing this research is that you would include these elements yourself, because if you don't include all these elements, you will find yourself very quickly suffering on the mark scheme. So alongside this guide of a lesson of where to go for your analysis, I have provided you with some websites that I've sort of screen grabbed, and I might actually end up showing you that in a lesson, actually, if I go and see you to go and help you with that. But really, the thing about websites is they're not very easy to see on a screen in detail, because they're very long rather than wide, and they've got a great deal of pixels to them. What I would say to you is have a look at the resources that I give you, and do read the articles and have a look at how the headline links to the stand first, links to the body text, and then the iconic images that work with that. So for example, here we've got this historical black and white photograph of the police raiding this black men's gathering back in the 60s, it would seem, and the idea is like, where is that being mentioned in the article? So we need to have that play between the complexity of the article and the photography. That concludes the lesson. Hopefully you can go and get this done. Remember, I cannot remind you enough how important it is to have your 3 research and statement of intent alongside your planning, but certainly those first things, because otherwise you won't know really what you're trying to make. Till next time, ta-ta.